Welcome to Let's Talk to Animals. My name is Shannon Cutts. I'm an animal intuitive and sensitive, a Reiki master practitioner for pets and their people, and an animal communication teacher. And I'm also your friendly neighborhood host for the Let's Talk to Animals podcast, the podcast where we do our utmost to de-woo, to demystify the language of all creatures, the language of universal communication, the interspecies language, which we all have equal access to. Some are just more aware of it and more practiced in using it than others. So, over our 4 seasons thus far, we've tackled so many topics related to animal communication, to interspecies communication, and energy healing. Today, one of the topics that is nearest and dearest to my heart, and I'm finally just making my way down the list and getting to it to really share personal behind the scenes as well as universal understandings of what it means to have an animal spirit guide, an animal totem, an animal helper, an animal mentor, an animal teacher, and how you can find yours. So, this feels like a particularly appropriate topic for this time of year. Perhaps I'm a little biased because I'm a December baby, but definitely December, at least here where we're having winter in the Western Hemisphere, has always felt like a real time of mystical unfoldment. It's a time to take shelter, to go within, to cocoon a little bit, to take stock, to rest, and even brumate if you're a reptile, or hibernate if you're a mammal, and just take note of what worked for the year just past, maybe what didn't work, what felt good, what didn't feel so hot, and discard the latter and bring forward the former. And if you've been craving more intuitive connection in your life, more of a sense of feeling able and equipped to befriend yourself and to feel friendship from the unseen aspects of life, or should I say the less seen aspects of life, to befriend your vibes, your gut instincts, your aha moments, your hunches, your spidey sense, whatever you want to call it, your angel encounters, your paranormal experiences, then finding and meeting and welcoming in your spirit animal is a great way to continue your exploration. So, first, I want to just kind of start out by chatting about what is a spirit animal, or what is an animal guide, or what is a spirit animal guide, or what is an animal totem. We have all of these different ways to explore and explain the concept, the mental concept of non-human animals as being helpers and encouragers and mentors and teachers to we human animals. Take this with a nice hearty grain of salt if anything I say doesn't resonate with you, or what you've already experienced, what you've already understood, what feels true to you, then of course just disregard it. Perhaps there's something that I can add to your understanding or to your experience of animals, of non-human animals, as helpers, as encouragers, as mentors and teachers in your own life. So, this is just my own understanding from my own experiences, not just in my professional life as an animal sensitive and intuitive, or Reiki master for pets and their people, but also just my personal experiences at a very intimate level of my own animal spirit guides, my own animal mentors, my own animal teachers, of course, having a lifelong love of animals and experiencing all of the ways that animals have been there for me and continue to be there for me in my life, both to celebrate joys and successes and also to help me stay steady and forward thinking when life gets tough, as it does for all of us. So, let's just start there with what do I personally and professionally mean when I share information about spirit guides or animal spirit guides or animal totems. What I mean is an animal that comes into our life, whether figuratively in the form of a symbolic animal, maybe a mythical animal, maybe an animal that's considered imaginary or made up, or an animal that's flesh and bone standing right in front of us. This animal comes into our life as a mentor, as a teacher, as a healer, as an encourager, as a friend, as family. So many times for so many years, and really so many decades. Throughout my life, I have often felt closer to non human animals than I have to my own species. So there can be so many aspects. If the connection itself, so this is kind of the thing to anchor back to, if the connection itself, if the reference, if the association itself brings with it a positive aspect, an aspect of learning, of personal growth, of encouragement, of furthering your purpose, your reason for being here, then you can know that at some level, this is a spirit guide in non human animal form for you in your life. And keep in mind that this is very, very personal. You do not have to believe in fairies or dragons to have a animal spirit guide that takes shape in one of these forms. You do not have to believe in anything in order to have an animal spirit guide or an animal helper in your life. In fact, these are the kinds of experiences that transcend our logical, rational, literal, Western, left brained cognitive thought processes. And we talk a lot more about that when I teach my intuitive animal communication adventure courses. The left brain mind has its place, it has its vital and irreplaceable role. We need it. If we understand what it's there for, we learn to love it. But picking up on the unseen and the unthought, if you will, the sensed, the felt, the known without knowing how or why we know it and not being able to unknow it, that is not the realm of the cognitive left brain mind. And so just keep in mind that your rational, logical left brain mind does not have to agree with any of this in order for it to be authentic and real in your personal experience, in your felt and sensed experience. So here we're really talking about an animal that is in your life that brings some kind of benefit. Now, I would say in my personal experience, as well as in my professional experience, at least 95% of the cases, the animals that come into our life that are serving in roles of a spirit guide or an animal totem or an animal helper or an animal protector, these are positive associations for us. So this is like 95% of the time we're going to see an animal that makes our heart sing, an animal that helps us stay strong, that encourages us, that gives us courage, an animal that sets a good example for us, an animal that inspires us to transcend our limitations, including our limited responses to tough times in life. About 5% of the time, however, it's an animal that really provokes us. Maybe it's an animal that repels us. Maybe it's an animal that we really dislike or we fear for some reason. And these animals too can be animal spirit guides for us. They can be mentors, they can be teachers, because they can encourage us to look behind the fear, behind the revulsion, behind the dislike or this distaste to find out what aspect of us we may be not liking or outright rejecting or judging or criticizing, and encourage us and invite us to make friends with those aspects within ourselves. So, spirit animals, animal totems, they're often almost always reflective of us in some inner way, in pointing out areas of ourselves that maybe we've disowned, maybe we have rejected, maybe we are constantly trying to amend or erase or change in some way in order to feel more whole or more worthy or more accepted or more belonging and a part of, rather than distant or ostracized or rejected in some way. And then let's shift over to when we're looking at our personal pets, the ratio flips on its head, because so often when we're looking at spirit animals in our own interspecies family, we're looking at animals who come into our life who may be very challenging and they may push a lot of buttons for us. And the incentive is that if we unfold this relationship, if we really dig in our heels and we push beyond our comfort zone and we bust out all the stops and we try all the things that we said we'd never try and we really make changes to either accommodate that animal's needs or to adjust to the challenges that are cropping up with health or behavior or inner family aggression or whatever's going on, then on the other side of that, we discover that we've become an entirely new being in the process and that we have a relationship with our animal, our so called problem child, that becomes deeper and more unconditionally loving than we ever dreamed possible. So, all of these are different aspects of an animal spirit guide or a spirit animal totem or a soul contract that we have with an animal, whether in real life, in our dreams, in our imagination, even that challenges what we think we know and who we think we are or are not, and invites us to push past those limitations and discover a whole new us, a whole new level of closeness and relationship with them, a whole new way of life. I've kind of loosely categorized 5 different types of spirit animals. That is not to imply on any level that there can't be other types or more subtle nuances within these 5 general categories. This is just, especially for you if you're new to animal spirit guides or animal totems or spirit animals or animal mentors or teachers, to kind of give you a framework. I don't know about you, but for me, when I'm learning something new, I like to learn a little bit about the road that's been paved ahead of me, and I like to gather some insights from others who've studied or experienced that same area that I want to study and experience more, and kind of try on some ideas for size, and it helps me get my bearings a little. So take this exploration of these 5 general types in that spirit, not to limit you in any way, but just to give you a sense of a place to start, some ideas or some experiences to play with in your consciousness. Maybe it will even jog some memories for you of dreams or waking life experiences or associations or chance encounters where you'll start to be able to put the pieces together in your own life about maybe who some of the major players, if you will, in your own animal spirit guide family happen to be. So the first type of animal is what I call the why you pick me animal. In fact, I've got a tool on my website over at animallovelanguages.com/free tools. And you can take it for a test drive yourself and you can learn about some of the soul lessons that different animal species, different companion animal species in particular, tend to bring into our lives. I'm going to use myself as a guinea pig here. I have always had a natural affinity for birds. In fact, the very first bird, I use air quotes if you're listening to the audio version, that I fell in love with was actually a helicopter. I guess it must have been the first bird that I saw. I know I was really, really young. And then I had an encounter with a flock of pigeons. I was eating bread with my grandpa one morning, and these pigeons were hungry and they surrounded me, and I was feeding them bread. And I just was so overcome with awe that these beings with wings who could go anywhere, who could easily lift up out of my reach, out of harm's way, down on the ground where we humans dwelled. And they actually chose to come and sit with me and surround me and take bread from my hands and trust me so easily. I felt like I'd done nothing to earn their trust or particularly to deserve it. In fact, I dedicate a whole chapter about this experience to the pigeons in my book, my memoir of life with my soul bird Pearl, called Love and Feathers: What a Palm-Sized Parrot Has Taught Me About Life, Love, and Healthy Self-Esteem. Reading that story in the book can also be a good way to explore maybe some real life or some dream encounters that you've had with specific animals that really just opened your heart, just really warmed your heart, and just were really deeply, deeply meaningful to you, even if you're not really sure why or how yet. The meaning is there, and it's there for you to unpack it and explore it and have your own aha moment experiences from it. So, this is really the first kind of spirit animal guide that you might encounter. I started begging my parents for a parrot when I was 7. When I was 8, I got Perky, and Perky and I were instant besties. Perky was a green and yellow parakeet. I write about this in Love and Feathers, the book as well. And Perky and I were just joined at the beak. And ever since, I have had one parrot, and I've had one parrot at a time. Some parrots have been with me for a long period of time. Others have left in rather dramatic and even catastrophic ways, but I've always kept company with one parrot. And I feel like I've only got one lung when I don't have a parrot in my life. In another podcast episode, I talk about the experience of waking up this past January and discovering that my soul bird, Pearl, had passed on the floor of his cage at the age of 24 years, just right after his 24th birthday. And it knocked the wind out of me. I was not prepared, at least not on a conscious level. And I literally felt like I only had one lung, I only had one arm, I only had one leg. This is one way when we're drawn to a particular animal species or a breed over and over again, and we feel like we're just not whole, we're just not ourselves without this animal in our life. That's how you can identify a lifelong spirit animal helper in your life. I have the same type of affinity with turtles and tortoises, and from a very young age. I have rarely spent any significant time without keeping company. Right now, I have an 8.5-year-old red footed tortoise named Malty and a 2.5-year-old three-toed hybrid box turtle named Io. And they teach me every day. They're just so wonderful. And I feel more fully me, more fully alive in their company. So that's another way to identify. So if you're not sure, and by the way, you can have more than one, you can have more than two, you can have more than three. You can have as many as are called into your life, but you might want to head over to animallovelanguages.com/free tools. Check out the Why You Pick Me tool. It's right at the top, totally free, and it'll give you some more insights about perhaps who your primary animal, spirit, species, or breed may happen to be and some of the soul lessons that they bring into your life. Another type of spirit animal or an animal spirit guide that you might discover you are keeping company with is an animal that just holds deeply significant meaning to you for some reason. I'll give you an example. I wasn't raised to value my intuition. I wasn't raised in a family or a community or through an educational system, or definitely not a workplace training system that placed any emphasis or significance on intuition. And so it was something that I've always had looking back in hindsight, and it was always trying to get my attention. It was always trying to work for me on my behalf. But I was pretty oblivious for many, many, many moons. I'm turning 53, and I really feel like my intuitive awakening did not really kick off until I was in probably my early 30s. So I spent a great many years just bumbling around. And even after I started to become aware that there was this whole other community and this whole other way of life that resonated quite a bit more with me on a deep, deep level, it took me a long time to transition from the way of life I had come to know so well, no matter how uncomfortable it felt at the time, and the people that had gathered around me, or the people I had allowed to gather around me that did not value intuition, did not see it as something that was real or worth any kind of credibility, if you will. And so, really, it's only been in the last decade or so when I've really started to feel like my intuitive systems, as they were always designed from birth to work, have really started to come online. The reason I share this is because for many years, quite literally, there were only two ways that my intuition or that animal spirits, helpers from a deeper place, a deeper realm, could get in touch with me and get my attention. And the first one is through ladybug messengers. I've always loved ladybugs. Anything that's round and cute with little dots on it and tiny little wings. Oh my goodness, adorable. And I would find these little buggers in the strangest places. I remember at one job I had for about a decade while I was running my charity, Mentor Connect, and that was a previous iteration of my career life. And I was working 3 jobs trying to make ends meet while I was running my charity in kind of in my spare time, if you will, every chance I got. I was working on Mentor Connect behind the scenes, and I was at one of my many temp jobs one day feeling utterly miserable. I was inside of a building, inside the interior. It was like a building within a building. We had an office suite that was fully enclosed inside of another building that also had different floors with other offices on it. And there was an interior staircase that was unique to just this suite, this multi-level suite of offices. And the reason I share that is because it was like, it wasn't just double walled, it was like quadruple walled. And there was absolutely no way that a ladybug could possibly have found its way inside it. And yet, as I was walking up this interior staircase in this completely insulated building within a building, there was a single ladybug crawling up the banister as I walked up the stairs. And I was the only one who saw it. I've had so many encounters like this. I remember one retreat I was on when I was working as a traveling singer-songwriter, and I was just thoroughly miserable and I felt really burnt out. And again, I was working so many different jobs and just trying to find myself, so to speak. And I remember being so worn out after singing my heart out and going over to my guitar case and opening the lid, and there was a single ladybug crawling inside the guitar case. Another experience that I had with ladybugs is I got sick one year, and I had this tradition that I would get sick every December because it was the only time I ever had any time off. And so my body would wait all year long until it knew that I was going to have 2 or 3 weeks off, and then it would just crash. And I remember being so sick and just thinking, I can't even start another year. I don't have it in me. And I laid in bed for 3 days, and I kid you not, there was a single ladybug that lived on my comforter with me for that whole period of time. And I don't know how I didn't roll over and squash it, but every time I woke up, it would be in a slightly different position on the comforter, or I would turn back the comforter and it would come crawling out. It was the darndest thing. It was so amazing. And I came to associate these ladybug visitors with the universe saying to me, hang on, it's going to get better. So that's another example of different ways. If you just have these random encounters, I met a woman while I was running my charity who'd lost her daughter to bulimia, and she saw dragonflies everywhere only after her daughter had passed. And they became deeply significant. When my father passed 2.5 years ago, I asked him to send me his favorite bird, other than the cockatiel, which was an owl. I had never seen an owl in my life until Dad passed. And after he passed, all of a sudden, an owl started to roost in the tree outside the home I was living in at the time and would hoot at night. And then another owl came and joined this owl. And then they both started hooting. And then one night I was out and one of the neighbors spotted a pair of owls up in this tree. It was just getting dark. It wasn't dark enough so that all you could do to find the owl was to follow the hoots and kind of peer up into the blackness and try to make out a shape. We could see them flying around. It was pretty remarkable. So these are just some examples. If you have these encounters every so often and they seem to coincide with periods in your life where maybe you're either flying high or you're